Hi, my name is Anna. I'd like to thank the organizers of this forum and the speakers. This is really inspiring. I'm finding a lot of hope that people are coming out on Assembly to talk about taxes, which is the most stimulating topic, maybe. So I guess my
video too for later.
So I guess my question to all of the speakers, or whoever wants to take it on, is just what is one thing that you're kind of finding hopeful right now, and to kind of leave it on a little bit more of a positive note potentially, is kind of one thing that you're also inspired by. So one thing that you're hoping, or one thing that you're feeling hopeful for, and one thing that's inspiring.
Great question, great question. And just pass it out over here.
Hi there, my name is Joshua. As I've been informing myself, I've come across the term neoliberal a couple times, and I heard it mentioned here a couple times, and I was just wondering if you could address what that is as opposed to conservative or liberal, what the methodology is, and how you think it's having an impact on our current regime. Thank you.
And over, yes, gentleman over here, then, and we're bringing Doug, appropriately cap it off. Over here. No, okay. We'll start. The best for last, Doug.
Oh, thanks. Hello, my name is Brian, and I'd like to first of all thank the Occupy movement for bringing us together. In my experience, I'm 61 years of age, and what I've found in history is that it takes people to get them in the street to march and make change. I've seen a lot of different people, good intent, but you want to do something, get out and support Occupy movement. The second thing I'd like to throw out to the questions, where my question is, we're dealing with issues right now, which are, they're really talking austerity issues within Alberta, etc., when we have great wealth, etc. But the question is when U.S. dependency on oil is going to be decreasing with fracking, etc. And actually, they say from 2016 and onwards that the United States will probably depend less on us and at some point be self-sufficient. So we're looking at some short-term situation today, but I look to you. What's your opinion on less revenue coming in for Albertans?
And Doug?
I like what Shannon said about public ownership of the oil, and I'm wondering if anybody would have any idea on what the numbers would be on the percentage of Albertans and Canadians that would want to nationalize the oil. I know that it's not a very popular thing for the really rich people, but I'd love to do it, and I think a lot of other people would. I'm wondering if anybody's ever heard the kind of numbers that would be there for that. I only had that one question, that's what I was going to end it at. But then he said the thing about neoliberalism, and that's a pet peeve of mine because I think it should always be referred to as neoliberal, ultra-conservative, fundamentalist capitalists. Free capitalism, it's like laissez-faire capitalism. It's not neoliberalism, liberals, it's free capitalism, you know, free conservative or ultra-free conservatism. So I'm tired. That's it.
That didn't take long. Go to this ground.
Well, one of the things that I feel I'm hopeful about right now, and it's been tempered a bit since the budget, is just the province's social policy framework process, where they actually did have a consultation process where they invited Albertans to contribute and talk about issues of inequality, issues of poverty. We had, you know, I feel it could have been a longer process and you know, more support given to people to come and speak about it. But I mean, the fact that we had that, I think, is really significant. And in my over 20-year history of you know, being in social work, no other government has done this, you know. And people, there's times when they wouldn't even talk about poverty, right? And so poverty doesn't exist in Alberta. Like, if we don't name it, it doesn't exist. So I mean, I'm hopeful about that. I'd like to, you know, how are we going to eradicate child poverty in 5 years, which was Premier Redford's promise while she was running. You know, the things that are in the budget now that just came out in early March don't indicate that, you know, serious commitment is being made to actually do that. So that's, you know, sorry, I'm being hopeful and then not so hopeful. But I don't know, I think, you know, I think that there is some type of groundswell or some collectivism. People are speaking about these things more. We're talking about inequality. Shannon's mentioned already just this, you know, the research that's coming out more and more about how inequality hurts all of us. You know, the work of Wilkinson and Pickett with the spirit level. They talked about how you know, we all suffer in a less equal society. Our health outcomes are less. So that we are all in this together, and as we realize that and not try to, I don't know, live in our gated communities or whatever, that we really see ourselves as part of a collective society, I think that that's hopeful and inspiring for me. So I'll just add those two together. And just in terms of neoliberal theory, you know, it's really a way of looking, and I mean, I think some of the components of it are, is government's bad? You know, anything government does is bad. That's why you must keep government small, you know, and it really comes out, I think, a lot in the, you know, I guess maybe the Republican Party in the US is probably a good champion poster child of it. I mean, Harper, of course, is, and but government's bad, so anything government does isn't good. So it's good to, you know, contract everything out or open everything up to the private sector. It's good to have open markets, free trade. You know, let's make sure that there's business can do whatever they want. We don't want to be in the way of business. We must keep taxes low, no taxes, you know, or very low taxes, again, to support. That's what will make it better for all of us. You know, somehow the belief, like we know the myth of trickle down, right? It doesn't trickle down, but that's still kind of perpetuating that. So if we get out of the way of business, they'll make everything wonderful for us. So these are some of the sort of ideas, the rhetoric of...
One of the main things I found really interesting was reading from some people who wrote about it, how a lot of it has to do with using public funds to fund private ventures.
Well, this is, yeah, this is a...
So it's not actually free market.
Yes. Okay, yeah. And, you know, we just had a sort of a trial balloon recently launched by the government talking about social impact bonds. Mm-hmm. So in social services, they're talking about, well, we're going to put out, you know, private industry can, you know, invest in social problems and then get a return on that. And, you know, obviously that's a good example of what you're just talking about. So, yeah, there is, that's another piece of it too. But anyway, that's some general things that people are saying about that. I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, I'll start maybe with Doug on your question about nationalizing the oil sector. I have no particular numbers on the extent of support, and personally, I'm not in favor of a wholesale nationalization of the industry, you know, by which I would imagine every private company somehow being taken over by the government. That wouldn't be the position I would take. However, having a publicly owned player in the industry, I think, is a perfectly reasonable position, and as I forget, Laurie or Shannon pointed out, we have all kinds of publicly owned players already in Alberta's oil industry, except they're owned by the Public of China, and the Public of Norway, and the Public of France. And it just makes your head spin to think, why aren't we doing that? Why do we welcome them in, but we won't do it ourselves? The long-term sustainability, Brian, where was whoever at? There you go. I think Alberta, I mean, my greatest long-term concern is that Alberta's economy, which is as prosperous as it is not sustainable. We could have made it sustainable if we'd been smarter. We still probably have the chance, but this is we're not living in a province that has a sustainable economy. So there's going to be some very tough corrections down the road, and I believe that's profoundly the case. The term neoliberal. Political terminology gets torqued all the time. I get reminded once in a while, and sort of jars me, that at one time in the US, the Republicans were the progressive party and the Democrats were the reactionary ones. The history of the term neoliberal, Jay may be able to give us a lecture on as a political scientist. But you're right about Things like P3s, public-private partnerships, and a whole bunch of other methods being used to transfer more and more public wealth into shareholder hands. Ironically, that's often counter to free market principles. I reflect back on a conversation I had with the representative of the Consumers Association of Canada, who would go to various hearings, and she found that she was often arguing for more competition. She'd be labeled as the left-wing troublemaker, but she was actually arguing for open competition, whereas the corporate sector was arguing for protection.
Yes.
And so things get turned on their heads. In terms of a sign of inspiration, I mean, I don't say this with any lack of sincerity. Having 50 people out here on a Sunday afternoon is inspiring. And what I can tell you is, because I get these calls and I do this quite a lot, these conversations are happening all over. I was in Camrose last week. I was speaking to another group in Edmonton 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm going to Red Deer in a couple of weeks. People out there are talking. Other provinces are further ahead. Other countries are even further ahead. We have to keep this going. We have to persist, and sooner or later, our voices will be heard.
Good. In relation to the question about diminished oil revenues in now and potentially also in the future, it's interesting. It's possible to imagine a few outcomes, and some of these might be positive. For instance, they might prompt us to readjust our revenue streams to make us start paying through taxes for the services we need, which would protect us from the volatility, from the artificial contraction in our services that often comes at a time of bust, and from the effects of boom and bust, which, as Laurie made clear, tends to hurt the most vulnerable in a disproportionate way. The risk to diminished oil revenues, and I think it's one that we see looming ever larger on the horizon right now, is that the solution will be shipping out more oil or more bitumen as fast as possible. That what we need to do here is build pipelines and to ship it all downstream to try to keep our revenues, our extremely small fraction of revenues, as high as possible, even in the face of declining international prices. And ultimately, I think that we need there to respond strongly as a society. We need to exploit the tar sands if we see fit to exploit them, if we decide that's the way to do it, in a way that best supports our well-being as a province, as Albertans and Canadians. We need to talk about the pace at which that exploitation goes ahead as a basic, fundamental question here in the province. And in fact, maybe just a small plug, Parkland actually has a report coming out within the next few weeks on the pacing of the tar sands. So I would invite you to keep your eye out for that if that's something that's of concern to you in particular. The issue of neoliberalism has been addressed. Maybe it might be useful to throw out some names as pegs that people can hang that school of thought on. You can see it emerging in Thatcher's time in the United Kingdom. You see it in the United States in Reagan's policies, and a lot of what Klein brought in Alberta can be defined as neoliberalism. So it's a form of free market fundamentalism, and we've unpacked that already a bit. So I'll leave it there. And maybe just to end up on the hopeful side, that's a good way to end. I think for many of us at Parkland, and particularly those of my colleagues who have been active in these venues longer than I have as a relative newcomer to these sorts of public forums at least, we're really happy to be talking about the revenue side of the ledger. For years the discourse was purely about the need to cut, the need to control spending. Even if we are talking about a sales tax, if that's what some people are promoting as the way forward, at least we're talking about revenues. That's progress, and it should be recognized as such, even as we need to keep trying to move that debate in more productive ways. And maybe in Parkland, of course, is affiliated with the University of Alberta, so we've had a front row seat to one of the major consequences of Budget 2013, which has been the harsh cuts to post-secondary. And I think at Parkland we found it quite inspiring to watch the organizing that has gone on around that by students at the University of Alberta and in other universities around the province. There are other events coming up, and I think that the most significant thing that can come out of that is solidarity, not just between the people directly affected by cuts in post-secondary, but also to other people who care about other public policy debates, other social interest issues. So to the extent that we're able to go out and support each other insofar as we get out into the streets on these issues, so much the better. I'd also say that a really interesting initiative also in education is something known as Ed Stake, which is an effort by local high school students to express their interest in having an active say in their education. They're doing an incredible job of some really local on-the-ground organizing, and it's inspiring.
Okay. I'll just take the microphone here. I just want a brief response on neoliberalism because it intersects with, I think, our final responses were on hope. Neoliberalism, there are really two powers in society. There's the power of money and there's the power of the people. And neoliberalism was an ideology that was created of, by, and for the powerful. And if you wanted a short snippet that used to be on the web, Susan George gave a nice history of the origins of neoliberalism and the powers in society that surround it. And in terms of hope, again, I think we see the signs of that today. I think we're forming a counter frame in terms of information. I think we have the best arguments today. I think neoliberalism is a zombie. It's a very walking zombie. It's a powerful zombie, but it's still a zombie, okay? And I think we can take on that zombie and we can win.